Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive. We are so glad you could be here with us today.
It's great to be here. We've got a really important topic today, I think. A heavy one, but in a good way.
We really do. And just so everyone knows where they are, you are on the Smart Capital School channel. So get ready because we're about to dissect a money management framework that might completely change how you see your finances.
hmm
But before we get to the solution, we have to start with a statistic that honestly, it just stopped me in my tracks.
It's a pretty shocking set of numbers, isn't it?
It is. Okay, so we're looking at the global top 1%. Who are these people? And the breakdown is, well, it's telling. 75% are entrepreneurs,
Right.
15% are investors, 7% are heirs. They inherited it. And then you have this tiny 3% who are like elite athletes or
The
artists.
super talents, the one in a million skills.
Exactly. But here's the part that I actually had to double check. I thought it was a typo. The number of salaried employees on that list.
It's a ghost town.
It is 0%, not one.
And that right there is the fundamental flaw in the story we're all told. Go to school, work hard, get that promotion, get the raise.
And you'll get rich.
The math says you won't. The data is clear. The key difference isn't about how hard you work. It's not about effort. It's about ownership.
Okay, but ownership of what specifically? I think a lot of people feel like they own their career.
But you don't. You rent your time. The wealthy, they own the actual mechanism of value. The business, the assets, the intellectual property. Even the artists, they own a rare skill that functions like an asset.
So if you're just selling your time.
The system owns you because you can always run out of time. You can't scale it. You can't work 400 hours in a week.
That's a pretty tough pill to swallow for anyone clocking in right now.
It sounds bleak, but it's actually the starting point for the fix. You don't have to quit your job. You just have to change where your money goes. And that's what this framework is about. It's called the 25-15-50-10 rule.
Sounds like my old gym locker combination.
It does, yeah. But it's actually a roadmap to start thinking and acting like an owner, no matter what your paycheck says.
All right, let's get into it then. The first number is 25, the growth bucket. So are we talking about self-help books and meditation here?
No. And I want to be really clear on this. People use invest in yourself as an excuse to buy stuff. Growth in this framework means one thing: buying assets that appreciate in value. It means buying your freedom.
So this isn't the feel-good bucket. This is the get-rich bucket.
I'd call it the stop being poor bucket. Most people are on a treadmill. You get paid, you pay for rent, food, bills, and then you're broke. You have to go back to work to fund the next month. This 25% is about breaking that cycle. It's about buying assets that will eventually pay for your existence so you don't have to.
25% is a lot, though. If you're making, say, $4,000 a month, that's $1,000 right off the top. I can hear people thinking, can't I just wait till I'm making more money?
Waiting is the single most expensive financial mistake you can make. The math on this is, well, it's terrifying. Let's look at the classic Billy versus Phil example.
Yes, Billy and Phil. Lay it out for us because this really shows the cost of waiting.
Okay, so Billy starts early. He's 20, doesn't have much money, so he invests just $200 a month. And he does this for 40 years until he's 60.
Okay, $200 a month. What's his total out-of-pocket contribution?
Over the 40 years, he puts in $96,000 of his own money. Now you've got Phil. Phil waits. He says, I'll invest when I'm more established. He starts at 30.
A decade later.
Exactly. And to catch up, he invests more, $300 a month. And he does that for 30 years until he's also 60.
Okay, so Phil puts in $300 a month. His total cash contribution is $108,000. So Phil actually put in more of his own money.
Correct. Over $10,000 more. But
Yeah.
when they both hit age 60, assuming just a standard 10% market return, which is the S&P 500 average, Phil ends up with about $678,000. Not bad.
No, that's a solid retirement. But what about Billy?
Billy has over $1.2 million.
Yeah. Double. He has almost double.
Almost double.
Even though he invested less cash.
That's the magic of compound interest. It's the snowball effect. Those first 10 years. Billy's money had a whole extra decade to work, to duplicate itself. Time is more powerful than the amount of money.
Okay, you've sold me on when. Let's talk about what. If I'm putting this 25% away, where does it go? You have this idea of an investment ladder.
Right. Think of a ladder. The bottom rung is your foundation. This is where most of that 25% needs to go. And we are talking about boring, simple index funds. The S&P 500.
You're buying the whole haystack, not looking for the needle.
Exactly. You're not trying to be a stock-picking genius. You're just buying a tiny piece of the 500 biggest companies in America. It's effective, and it requires like zero financial genius.
Okay, so that's the base. What's the next step up on the ladder?
I'd say real estate. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go buy a house. You can buy REITs real estate investment trusts. It's a way to own a small piece of a huge portfolio of properties. It gives you diversification.
Then there's a rung that I think gets overlooked a lot: skills.
Yes. This is where the definition of asset gets interesting. If you spend money to learn a high return skill, like coding or sales or digital marketing,
Hmm.
that's an asset. And it's one no one can ever take from you. A market crash can't wipe out your ability to code.
It's like what those 3% of artists and athletes have: a monetizable talent.
Precisely. And then way up at the top of the ladder, the risky part, you have your alternative investments. Crypto, fine wine, sneakers,
The stuff that sounds cool at a dinner party.
and makes for a terrible retirement plan.
Mm.
That's the casino. Maybe you put 1% of your portfolio there for fun, but you never ever build your foundation on it.
And we have to talk about taxes here because it's not what you make, it's what you keep.
Taxes will destroy your compounding if you let them. So you have to use tax-advantaged accounts first. In the US, that's a 401k or a Roth IRA. In the UK, it's an ISA.
The Peter Thiel story is the ultimate example of this, isn't it?
It's the ultimate tax hack, yeah.
Yeah.
He put his early PayPal founder shares, which were worth almost nothing at the time, inside a Roth IRA.
And a Roth means you pay tax now, but all the growth inside it is tax-free forever.
Exactly. So when PayPal went public and those shares became worth billions, he owed zero tax on it.
That's just wild. So for a normal person, there's a simple strategy called the 3-fund portfolio. How does that work?
It's the easiest way to do this. You just buy 3 index funds. 1, a total U.S. stock market fund. That's your engine. 2, a total international stock market fund for diversification outside the U.S.
And the third?
And 3rd, a total bond market fund. Bonds are basically loans to the government. They're your stabilizer. When stocks crash, bonds usually hold steady or even go up.
They're the shock absorbers.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And the key is to automate it. Have that 25% move automatically the day you get paid. If you wait to do it yourself, life gets in the way.
Okay, so that's growth, building the future. But that brings us to the second number, 15%. This bucket is called stability.
Or as I call it, the shield.
And there's a personal story here about a Volkswagen Golf that feels very relatable.
Oh, absolutely. The classic mistake. I was 18, bought a car on credit I couldn't afford just to look cool. 3 months later, the engine blew.
And with no savings, that's a catastrophe.
It's a total domino effect.
Yeah.
No money to fix the car meant I might not be able to get to my job. I had to take out another high-interest loan just to fix it. One piece of bad luck set me back an entire year financially.
So the Stability Fund isn't about making money.
No. Its only job is to stop a bad day from becoming a bad decade. It prevents you from having to sell your growth assets at the worst possible time.
So how much do you need in the shield? What's the formula?
It's simple. You calculate your bare bones survival number. Just rent, basic food, utilities, transport. Multiply that number by 5.
5 months of survival expenses.
Exactly. And that money cannot, under any circumstances, be in the stock market. It needs to be somewhere with zero risk, accessible within 24 hours.
But if it's just sitting in a checking account, inflation will eat it up.
Correct. Which is why you put it in a high-yield savings account,
Mhm.
an HYSA. Right now, they're paying 4 or 5% interest. You're basically treading water against inflation, but with zero risk.
And there are a few tactics to build this up faster. I like the skim.
The skim is the best way. Automate the 15% transfer the moment your paycheck lands. You just learn to live on what's left. Also, things like Roundup apps. They work. It's painless, but it adds up.
And what's this replacement promise?
It's a mindset. If you have to use the shield, say, for a car repair, you now owe yourself that money back. You pause everything else, investing, fun, and you aggressively refill that bucket. It's a fire extinguisher. You use it, you refill it immediately.
Okay, 25% growth, 15% stability. That brings us to the biggest chunk, 50% for needs. This seems to be where most people get tripped up.
This is where the war is won or lost. I mean, there's that crazy stat that 60% of people earning over $100,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck.
6 figures and still broke. It's hard to believe.
It's because their needs have become tangled up with their ego. True needs are simple. Housing, food, utilities, transport, insurance. That's it. Your 5 different streaming subscriptions are not a need.
There's the story of 2 friends. The guy with the designer clothes and the nice watch has, what, $43 in his bank account?
And the other guy in baggy jeans and an old car has a 6-figure investment portfolio. Wealth is what you don't see. It's the money that wasn't spent on the flashy watch.
So to hit this 50% number, you have to focus on the big things, not just cutting out coffees.
Exactly. This is all about housing and transport. They're the two budget killers. If your rent is 50% of your income, the game is over before it starts. You have to look at house hacking, getting a roommate, maybe even living at home for an extra year to build capital.
In cars. The new car payment is a dream killer for so many people.
It's financial poison. You're paying interest on an asset that is guaranteed to lose value every single day. The advice is simple. Buy reliable used cars. Let someone else take that massive depreciation hit in the first few years.
What about some psychological tricks to help with spending? I like the 7-day rule.
It's an amazing impulse killer. You see something you want online, just wait 7 days. 90% of the time, the excitement will have faded and you'll realize you didn't really want it.
And the cost per wear idea.
It's such a great way to reframe value. A $60 pair of boots you wear 100 times costs you 60 cents per wear. That's great value. A $200 pair of sneakers you wear twice costs you $100 per wear. That's a terrible purchase.
It forces you to ask, is this actually improving my life or just my image?
An image is very, very expensive.
Okay, so we've allocated 90% of our income, 25% growth, 15% stability, 50% needs. That leaves 10%. And this bucket is called joy.
Or sanity, as I like to call it.
I can already hear some people saying, why? Why not put that 10% into growth and retire a few years earlier?
Because humans aren't robots. If you try to live a life of total deprivation, you will eventually snap. It's called revenge spending. You save every penny for 6 months, feel miserable, and then you blow $1,000 on something stupid to make yourself feel better.
It's like a crash diet. It's not sustainable.
Exactly. This 10% is the pressure release valve. It's the scheduled cheat meal for your finances. And the rule is, this money has to be spent guilt-free.
The story about getting shingles from stress really stood out here.
Yeah, that's a real example. Someone was grinding so hard, saving so much, they literally made themselves sick from the stress. The doctor told them they needed a vacation.
So the ski trip was basically a medical expense.
In a way, yes. You have to invest in your own energy and sanity or the whole system falls apart. You can't earn money if you're burnt out and miserable.
So what are some high-value joy categories?
Experiences over things, always. Travel creates memories that appreciate over time. Hobbies, things that get you into a state of flow. Socializing dinners with friends that build your relationships. And gifts for other people.
And the logistics are key here, right? A separate account.
Has to be. A separate account, maybe a separate debit card. When the joy fund hits 0 for the month, the fun is over. No borrowing from stability to go out to dinner. That firm boundary is what makes it work.
Okay, so let's tie it all together. The 25, 15, 50, 10 rule.
25% to growth, to buy your future freedom. 15% to stability, to protect your present. 50% for your core needs. And a non-negotiable 10% for joy to keep you sane on the journey.
What this really seems to be is a system for automating discipline.
That's the whole point. You don't rely on willpower, which always fails. You build the system, you automate the transfers, and it works for you in the background. It shifts the entire goal from looking rich to actually becoming free.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought, a challenge, really.
The bank statement challenge.
Yeah. Go and print out your bank statement from the last 30 days. Go through it line by line and ask yourself a simple question. Does this piece of paper reflect my deepest values? Or does it just reflect my worst impulses?
That's a tough question, but it's probably the most important one you can ask.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Goodbye, everyone.